Welcome to the Crafty Mini, and this is the episode 2 on the beginner's guide. So in this one we're going to be painting the actual miniature now. Very simple. We're not doing any fancy stuff. This is for newbies, so they can get in and start to enjoy this hobby like the rest of us are. So to start with, once you've obviously built the miniature, first thing you need to do is base coat it. Now you'll hear tons of stuff online from various types of ways to base coat or to undershade, zenithal highlight and things, but again, keeping it simple. I'm just doing a nice dark grey all over. That's just so I can differentiate from the areas I've painted to the light grey plastic, and a nice dark coat's going to work well with the colour scheme that we've got planned. If you're using a lot of lighter colours, then go for a lighter base coat, just because the paint's going over that darker colour. It's going to take you more and more coats. But this first step, so I've just slightly watered down the paint and I'm just popping this all over the miniature. Really simple. Right, so on to the first actual colours. So I'm going to start off with some browns, because with this miniature it's actually wearing a lot of like leathers and things of that nature. So always have a look at what's actually on the miniature and try and get a colour according. By all means paint it whatever colour you want, because at the end of the day these are your minis and it's not up to anyone else to dictate. I like to try and go a bit more realistic with the paint job, but again, this is something really simple. And this is actually this very first step. This is the best time to get you practicing your brush technique. If you imagine it like those pictures where you get numbers and you have to colour in certain colours for specific numbers, think of it like that. You want to stay within the lines and don't go over. If you do go over, it's fine. It's not a hard mistake to rectify. You just go back in with the base colour. But at this point, it's a really good way of practicing only painting the areas that you want, and take your time with it. Don't rush. Don't think you've got to blast this with paint really quickly. It's one of the issues you can find with, say for example, a Space Marine. Because the armour is predominantly one colour, you can smash that on, and when it comes to doing all the trims and the little bits of extra detail, that's where you've really got to hold your nerve and practice, and that's where it can come undone and people get frustrated. So if you start with a miniature like this, where it's quite simple, it's a lot of organic shapes, there's not a lot of detail on it really. When you look at the tunic, it's only really the belts that are on there. There's a bit of fur lining and things, but nothing major to worry about. And so again, just re-emphasising that, take your time with this. Think of it like a paint by numbers, and you're just going in and you're picking out the areas. Now if you've got something like a starter paint set, just use that initial brown and mix in other colours if you need to. Don't think you need to go out and buy 10 different types of brown for all the multitudes of leather. Just mix your paints, and also that's a good way of practicing and thinking about colour theory and things. So like for example, on this one I'll use so the initial brown that I've used for the shield, but then for the tunic I had a little bit of touch of I think it's pale sand from Vallejo, and it just lightens it up a little bit, and then so the browns all look different to each other. And again, take your time. And if you do make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You can rectify it, but this is the best time to get your brush technique practiced and honed in. Right, so here's an example of that, just taking your time. So I'm painting just the tunic now. So I've got some of my base brown, added a bit of that yellow ochre as I've mentioned just, and I'm now taking my time and going in. And you'll see I'm not going fast. I can paint a little bit faster than this, but this is just to show how easy this is. And I'm picking out that leather tunic that's on the top above the waist belts, the sort of part of the skirt of it below, and then she's just got a little bit of covering on the tops of her arms. That's it, nice and simple. And again, I'll just keep reiterising this. Take your time, do not rush this, and have fun with it. If you get a little bit bored or a little bit fed up, take 5 minutes, go and have a cup of tea or whatever, have a bit of time away and come back. I struggle a lot with that, is I can't paint huge volumes. I'll do a sit down and I'll do 3 or 4 minis for like a bunch of videos, and then I won't touch it for 2 or 3 weeks because I've done too much in one go. It's very rare that I'll sit and paint every day for a long period of time. It's only when I've got the wet palette out that I'll do that. And looking at items like wet palettes and things, don't worry. That's for a future video. I'll go into more detail. they're not essential. You know, just an old bathroom tile to put your paints on, just so they don't dry up, and just go from there. You do not need to go and spend, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pounds, because you can on all the paint sets and various things, and this particular type of brush and that type of brush and things. You really don't have to. You can keep this really, really cheap. The only thing I'd say put a bit more money into is your paints. Go for like a starter set from a company, just because they're designed for miniature painting. I mean, when I first started, I was using acrylic paints from a hobby store, and they don't work very well. But again, take your time and enjoy this process. Get your brush technique honed down. So again, another step here. So my very first brown that I used for the shield, I've then added a tiny amount of black just to darken it, and then I'm going in now and picking out. So I'll marry things like the belt with the sort of the under tunic that's on the lower legs, and the leather around the van braces on our arms, and it just marries those three areas together, keeping it simple. Just get this coat on and leave it at that, and then we'll go on to the next step. And again, at any point, if you've gone over an area that's had a previous colour on, have a look. It's, you know, if you've got using a wet palette or a tile or anything like that to hold your paints, just go back to that colour, clean your brush, go back and paint over it. You might need a couple of coats if it's a lighter colour and a darker colour, that's fine, but go back to it and neaten it up and practice getting into those lines. Right, so this next step is going to be the flesh. Now, you'll see towards the end of the video when we do the final steps, this is one of the easiest ways to do Caucasian flesh. If you want to do any sort of darker flesh, you can use the same method, just go for a lighter tone on the initial step, because we'll be using a wash just to darken this down and get into all the recesses. But I'm just using basic skin tone from Vallejo. Now, she's got a couple of little bits of just her lower arm showing underneath the sort of tunic she's wearing just above the van brace, and then her face and her hands, and that's it. And again, taking my time, going in. Sometimes going over a darker paint it'll look a bit patchy. That's perfectly fine and normal, so don't worry. Let it dry, do a second layer. Whatever you do, don't think that, oh, I have to slap the paint on really, really heavy to cover up those darker patches, because all you're going to do there, that heavy paint is just going to dry and then cover up detail, and it'll thicken it. And things like where, so the model's got, like on the sculpt, it'll have the creases between her fingers. If you put a big slab of paint on there, it'll just look like a big bump, almost like a Lego hand. Same as on the face. If you put a big blob of paint over the eyes because you're trying to lighten up that darker area from the base coat, all you're going to do is she won't have any eyes, and it's just going to look really, really weird. So it's better to put multiple thinner coats on than just one thick heavy coat. Right, and then exactly like we've just done on the flesh, we're going to do with the hair. So again, this is going to be a really simple step. You'll see how this will work in a moment. But so all the hair, so obviously she's like a Viking-esque, so I'm going to do something like a blonde hair. And I've just got yellow ochre by Vallejo, just popping it on. But whatever yellow will do, as long as it's not too bright and too sort of sun yellow, too in your face. But again, any colour will do. If you want to do a lighter brown, or maybe even like she's got grey hair, things like that, any colour you want, because the step we'll be doing in a moment to bring out the detail, it'll work on any of the colours. And again, take time, block it all out. If you accidentally go over anything, don't worry, this is a lighter paint, so the darker paints will cover it a lot easier if you do make any mistakes. And again, it's that same thing, take your time, make sure you enjoy it. If you need to just have 5 away because your brush control and you're like, I'm getting stressed out and fed up, that's perfectly normal. We've all been there when we started on this hobby. Just take a moment and just have a step back, have a look at the miniature and take your time. And this is just to reiterate a previous point. So you can see the flesh is a little bit patchy. That dark grey is coming through a little bit as the paint's now dried. So I'm going back in with the original base coat, a thinner layer again, and just building up that opacity and taking my time with it. And this, so you just keep all the nice detail that's on that miniature, and you'll get the skin tone that you want. Right, so this could be a bit of a tough bit for a lot of people. So there's a lot of fur and a lot of individual strands. Now you can go in and pick those out with a brush, by all means. There's a much easier way, and it's basically called dry brushing. This is a technique you'll see on a lot of videos if you've looked up at the miniature hobby, and a lot of people have done videos on it. All it is I'm just taking a lighter colour, so that base grey, and I've mixed in some of the skin tone and a bit of the yellow, just to lighten it a touch. And you can use any colour you want. You can just put white in there if needs be. I'm just doing this to save time on the palette. Mix it up. Then what you want to do is actually, once the paint's on the actual brush, is wipe off the majority onto a kitchen towel or a bit of cloth or whatever it is. So you're actually then, you've just got pigment on there, and you're just gently brushing over the top of all these, the fur trims and the back of the inside of the cloak. And all it'll do is pick up the raised areas and leave all the areas below in that dark grey base coat. Makes it punch, makes it look really nice and pop, like you've done a load of extra sort of effort and detail. And it's a simple method. Now just start off with, just do it like that. There is a whole other science that you can go into when it comes to dry brushing, which in itself is like a huge iceberg to go and uncover. But at this point, again, we're keeping this very simple. And you can see here, as I'm just brushing over it, it's just making all those strands of fur on the cloak just pop a bit more. A really simple step to get a bit of punch from the detail on the miniature. Right, so metallics. Again, like the dry brushing, it's a whole iceberg of information out there. You've got non-metallic metals, where you use normal flat colours that make it look like metal, and so on. There's a variety of things out there. Again, so the premise of this is for a beginner. Keep it simple. Most paint sets will have some form of silver in it. Just use that silver. So for this, I'm using Vallejo gunmetal, and I'm going over any bits that are silver on the miniature. So you've got the buckle in the middle of the shield, the metal trim around, and on the shield itself you'll see it's got like a split halfway, and there's this sort of metal piece that does that. Then I'm going to go and do the entirety of the sword and the blade itself. And to be fair, when you see this miniature, there are two very small buckles on the belts that separate that tunic, and I've not bothered. It's not a big enough detail to warrant trying to go in with the metal and pick it out. Now at this point the entire miniature is blocked out, and it's a case now we want to make it look a bit more defined and give it a bit more sort of oomph with the actual paint job. And this is really simple way of doing it, especially for beginners, is you get yourself some shades or tones, and these are basically extremely watered down paints, heavily thinned, and you use them as washes over the area. So to start with, I've got a nice flesh wash. This one, it just goes on anywhere, as the name says, that there's flesh. So the hands, and you brush this all over. If it pulls and you see like a dark blob, just move your brush and move it around. And you can see, especially on the face, it basically sinks into all the recesses, and it'll make our eyes, a nose and a mouth more pronounced. On the hands, it goes into the creases of the fingers, and they pop a little bit more. And this is a really simple way of just getting that extra little bit of detail out of your miniature. And for a new miniature painter, this is a great way of getting extra detail. And when it's on there, it looks good when it's finished. It's a nice paint job. It's a good starting point. Obviously, you can do things after this as you get more. You progress more and more. But just keep it simple. Now, same thing for all the metal. All I've done here is I've got a pot of Nuln oil from Citadel, and what I'm doing, this is actually going to go on all the fur as well, because that'll sink over that brighter area we've dry brushed and sink into the sort of the crags of the details and make them darker, so it pops a little bit more. So all of the fur gets this Nuln oil, and anything that's metallic. And same again, if you see the wash sort of blob together and you got a big chunk of it, just move it around with your brush, because you don't want it to blob, because when it dries it goes super dark. and then on anywhere that's brown, so the under tunic, the belts, the shield, the actual tunic itself, and the boots, and a hair, I just put it's called Strong Tone by Army Painter, and it's just a nice brown wash, and this will cover everything and do exactly like we've done with the skin and the black on the metal. This goes into all the recesses, makes the detail pop a bit more. Just let this dry, and it's a really simple and effective way. Makes the miniature pop, makes it look like you've put a lot more effort in than you might have done. Really simple, nice way, especially for beginners. And when you see it, because after everything's blocked out, it looks good, but it looks very, very flat, and this will make it pop and look 3D. They do tend to, with washes, they do tend to dry a little bit glossy, so a little bit shiny, but that's okay. You can put a matte varnish on or a satin varnish just to bring that down a little bit. On this miniature, when you see the glamour shots in a second, I actually haven't. I don't mind it too much on this. And at the end of this, when it's dry, that is a simple paint job. Really, really easy. It's basically just one colour for each of the areas, a wash, done. It picks everything out, you get all the detail punching. Yeah, it's not the best thing in the world, but it'll do. And I'll tell you, when you've got a unit of them done like this, and they're all on the table together, if you're playing a game, they look really good when they're all in one sort of block. And again, remember, this is for you. This is your miniature, your hobby. You've put your time and effort into this and your money. It's not for other people to judge or criticise. Unless, of course, you're actually, you are asking for tips and things. That's different. Obviously, now when we come to the glamour shots, the base does look a bit dodgy. It does stand out, but that's going to be the next video. We're going to be looking at basing, a really simple and easy basing technique that I picked up from a fellow YouTuber, so we'll get into that. And yeah, this is your first miniature, and it doesn't look too bad, to be fair. And then from there, more practice, spend more time doing it, picking up other techniques and other things, and you'll be surprised how quick you can progress. But don't be disheartened if it takes a while. That's perfectly normal. We all started there at some point. But thank you very much for watching. I hope this has helped, and it does okay. And the first video got some lovely comments, and it seemed that it was coming across very user friendly for newbies, and that's what I wanted, because I get a lot of people asking, how do you get into it, what should you buy and things. Ultimately, spend as little or as much as you can. It is up to you, it's your money. But just get a simple starter paint set. That'll have everything that you need in there to start with. Get yourself a box of minis that you like the look of. Ignore the fact if someone tells you, oh, this army is better than this army. If you're looking into the wargaming, just buy something because it looks cool, because you'll want to paint it and you'll want to spend more time on it. Because if you get something you don't like the look of, you're not going to want to paint it. Trust me, I've been there and I've wasted money on it. But yeah. And then the next episode, we're going to look at basing the model, just making it stand out in a really simple way, which a fellow YouTuber gave me the idea of. And that'll be it. We'll go from there. So we'll see you on the next one. Thank you all very much for watching. Cheers.